It was on the day of February 1st, 1960, in Greensboro, North Carolina, when four African-American college students, Joseph McNeil, Ezell Blair Jr., Franklin McCain, and David Richmond, went to a whites-only lunch counter and asked for coffee. For a request as small as such, they were denied service and told to leave. Facing threats and possible violence, the students chose to sit in a booth until they were granted service, making sure they did not come off as hostile or violent on any circumstance with their request. Whilst being intimidated and continuously threatened, they did not budge from their seats and just waited patiently. Little did they know that they would become known as the Greensboro Four, and that this stance they took would cause a movement that led to the end of segregation within whites-only food courts and restaurants. It would later be called and known as the SNCC Sit-ins as a part of the civil rights movement between 1954 and 1974. In the breakthrough of this event, the purpose in which these students fought for was to end segregation within the restaurants that which separated people of color from whites. Not much attention was brought on the cause at first, but as word began to spread and students contacted one another, the attention and interest with news broadcasters and social media began to increase gradually. As stated in an article entitled The Sit In Movement, written by ushistory.org, the students began to fight against the Jim Crow laws. Using the influential teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. as well as Gandhi, their nonviolent approach to the situation showed their stance. With the common struggle of racial segregation in the South that had been formed through the Jim Crow laws, the Students' Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was later formed and modeled after the courageous college African American students. This movement allowed many other black students to stand up for their rights as well as gain opportunities in the future many could only dream of. The early leaders of SNCC were Stokely Carmichael and Fannie Lou, and they helped form and organize the sit-ins in which students would be participated in. During these sit-ins, students were given small instructions, which were just sit quietly and wait patiently to be served. Often the participants would be threatened by local customers and even pelted with food. According to Kurt Hohenstein, the onlookers even tried to provoke fights that would never come from the students, and if there ever were a physical attack, the students would curl up into a ball on the floor and take the punishment due to any violence having the potential to undermine the spirit of the sit-ins and their no-violence policy. Though the Greensboro sit-ins had been temporarily discontinued, the idea had spread to other students across the states, and with their next week, sit-ins occurred in North Carolina cities of Winston-Salem, Durham, and many more. As stated in an article entitled Sit In Movement by Britannica, on February 10th, Hampton, Virginia became the first city outside of North Carolina to experience a sit-in, and by the end of the month, sit-ins had occurred in more than 30 communities in 7 states. Eventually, the SNCC sit-ins came to an end in 1960, that exact same year. Although the movement did not last long, it formed the foundation for many other movements that came, such as freedom rides and many more. According to Kurt Hohenstein, the changes from the sit-ins did not come immediately, but within a few months, large differences could be seen within the cities and upper states such as Arkansas, Maryland, North Carolina, and Tennessee, as whites-only restaurants and food places began to desegregate. The SNCC sit-ins are not as well known by many, but it should be, due to the sit-ins movement producing a new sense of pride and power for African Americans. By rising up on their own and achieving substantial success through their protesting against segregation within the society in which they lived, blacks began to realize that they could change their communities by taking local, coordinated action. For many white Southerners as well, the sit-ins demonstrated the blacks' dissatisfaction with the status quo, in which was forced upon them, and showed the economic harm could come to white-owned businesses unless they desegregated. With this system, it also began to break down the barriers that were once created by the Jim Crow laws, thus allowing more integration to happen on a more peaceful scale. Even though it only lasted for no longer than a year, this event marked the first major effort by thousands of local black civil rights activists to start making a change within the community, and the laws created these inequalities among the people. It is today now that people can enter restaurants without being asked to leave because of their specific race. The Greensboro Four that started this movement now have statues in honor of their courageousness that stand in North Carolina, serving as a milestone to show how far their intentions to desegregate had come.